All right, let's dive into a topic you might not expect today. It's all about physical education.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at a book by Timothy Lynch. It's
Mhm.
called Physical Education and Well-Being: Global and Holistic Approaches to Child Health.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right? It sounds a little dense, I'll admit,
Yeah.
but stick with us on this deep dive because it's packed with some surprising insights
Okay, yeah, I'm curious.
about how movement can benefit a child's well-being, like their whole well-being.
Hmm.
And even maybe give us adults some food for thought, too.
Yeah, always good.
So I don't know about you, but when I think about PE,
Hmm.
I kind of think back to
Yeah.
dodgeball
Right.
and those fitness tests, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Those presidential fitness tests.
Exactly. But Lynch, he really kind of reframes the way we think about PE.
Okay.
It's not just about those things anymore. He
Yeah.
really argues for this more holistic approach,
Okay.
one that recognizes the connection between physical activity. Yeah.
And a child's, cognitive,
Yeah.
social, and emotional development.
Interesting. So the whole child.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm kind of curious,
Yeah.
what does this holistic approach actually look like in practice? Is it really that different?
Well, Lynch highlights this thing called learning through movement.
Okay.
So it's not just about, teaching kids how to throw a ball or
Hmm.
run faster.
Right.
He describes this one lesson where, students are learning about heart health through dance, which is really cool.
Oh, wow.
And then they connect it to, cultural celebrations in their community.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah.
It's not just about the physical activity. It's like connecting it to something
Right.
that's meaningful, in the students' lives.
Absolutely. And that's where I think this idea of the sociocultural approach comes in.
Okay.
So Lynch is arguing that the most effective physical education programs.
Really connect what kids are learning to their everyday lives and their cultures.
So it's instead of just learning these isolated skills,
Huh.
they're learning how those skills can be applied in all these other different contexts.
Exactly.
I can see how that would make PE so much more engaging and relevant,
For sure.
especially for kids.
Yeah.
Because when I think back to my PE classes,
Hmm.
it was just kind of okay,
Uh-huh.
we're going to learn how to play basketball now.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Right.
It wasn't connected to anything else.
Yeah, it was just like a skill in a vacuum.
Exactly. But this is totally different.
It is. And it's not just some kind of, abstract theory either.
Oh, good.
Like here in the U.S., we have the Comprehensive School Physical Activity Program,
Okay.
or what they call CSPAP.
CSPAP?
Yeah, and it's basically the national framework for physical activity
Okay.
and physical education in schools.
So CSTAP, what does that actually look like in practice? Can you kind of break it down?
Yeah, so it goes beyond the traditional PE classes.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it encourages schools to incorporate physical activity
Mm-hmm.
throughout the entire school day, not just in that one designated PE time.
Like what? So give me some examples.
Like active recess, classroom movement breaks, even walking or biking to school.
Oh, okay. So it's creating this culture of movement and well-being that
Right.
kind of extends beyond the gym.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. I can see how that would fit in with this
Mm.
overall holistic approach we've been
Mhm.
talking about.
Yeah. And Lynch's research actually takes it even further than that.
Okay.
He did this global comparison of physical education approaches
Oh, interesting.
in Australia, the Middle East,
Wow.
the United Kingdom, and the United States.
Okay, so all over.
Yeah, all over.
That's great. Did he find any standout approaches? Is there anything?
Yeah, there was.
Okay, tell me.
He found that the UK actually stood out because their teacher training programs really place a strong emphasis on incorporating that sociocultural approach.
Oh, interesting.
So the teachers there felt really well equipped
Okay.
to teach both health and PE
Mm-hmm.
in a way that really connected with their students' lives.
So the UK is kind of leading the charge in this area.
Yeah, in a way, I guess you could say that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But we keep throwing around this term, sociocultural approach.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like in a PE class? Can you paint me a picture?
So imagine, right, a PE class
Mm-hmm.
where students aren't just learning how to play basketball,
Okay.
but they're also exploring the history and cultural significance
Oh, wow.
of basketball.
Okay.
So they might be researching how basketball has evolved over time.
Yeah.
They might be learning about famous players from different cultures
Mm-hmm.
and even discussing how the sport can be used to promote social justice and inclusion.
You know what? Now that you mention it, I think Lynch actually described something very similar to that in the book.
He did. He did.
And he talked about a teacher who used dance to teach students about all these different cultures and historical periods.
That's right, yeah.
It's all about making those connections
Yeah.
between physical activity and the wider world.
Absolutely.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Good.
But before we move on, I'm actually really curious
Yeah.
to learn more about how this sociocultural approach actually plays out in the classroom.
Okay.
Like, what are some of the specific strategies that teachers are using, to bring this to life? I think that's where we need to head next in our deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so we've talked about this sociocultural approach.
Yeah.
And it sounds awesome, like I'm really into it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But I'm guessing, it's probably not always easy to implement.
Right.
Like, what are some of the challenges that teachers face when they're trying to put this into practice?
Yeah, you're right. It definitely takes some effort. I think one of the biggest things is just like a mindset shift for PE teachers.
Oh,
Instead of just focusing on like the technical aspects of a sport or activity, they really have to think about how to connect those movements to like bigger ideas, real world applications.
Yeah, like how do you make dodgeball
Right.
relevant,
Exactly. It takes a lot of, creativity planning.
And we're talking about working with kids who all have different backgrounds and abilities.
Totally.
So you have to be really sensitive to all those differences to make sure it's inclusive and engaging for everybody.
That's the goal.
Are there any like specific resources or training programs that can help teachers implement this approach effectively?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, good.
Like professional development is key. There are like workshops, conferences, online resources, all sorts of things that give teachers like tools and strategies to help them incorporate the approach into their lessons.
Okay.
Lynch also talks about collaboration.
Oh, interesting.
Like peer-to-peer learning.
Okay, so teachers can kind of share ideas and best practices.
That is really helpful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about the time constraints, though.
Yeah, that's a big one.
How do teachers find the time to plan these more complex and engaging lessons?
It's definitely a valid concern, and Lynch acknowledges that time is like a major barrier. He suggests advocating for more PE time in the school day.
Yeah.
But he also encourages teachers to be creative, and think about how they can integrate movement and physical activity into other subject areas too.
Oh, that's a great idea. So it doesn't have to be just a separate PE class.
Right.
It's about kind of weaving movement into the whole school day.
That's the idea.
I love that.
Yeah.
There was something that really caught my attention in Lynch's book. He mentioned that while competition can be carried out comprehensively or inclusively, belonging, being, and becoming physically educated has not been achieved.
Right.
Like, what do you make of that statement?
I think it's really insightful.
Yeah.
It really gets to the heart of like why this approach is so important. We can have all these fancy programs and equipment.
Yeah.
But if kids don't feel a sense of belonging and purpose, then we're missing the mark.
It's about more than just like mastering the skills.
Thanks.
It's about fostering this love of movement and a sense of community, a belief in their own abilities.
Right.
It sounds like the sociocultural approach could be a game changer for that.
Yeah, I think it has the potential to be incredibly transformative, when it's done well.
Yeah.
It creates this environment where all students feel valued and challenged, empowered to reach their full potential.
I love that.
But, we need to be mindful of those challenges and really work together to find solutions.
It's a journey.
It is. It's a journey, not a destination.
I love that. Speaking of journeys, Lynch took us on a little bit of a global tour in his book.
He did. He did.
Comparing different approaches to PE around the world. So what were some of the key takeaways from those comparisons?
Well, one of the most interesting things was the contrast between the UK and the US.
Okay.
While the UK seems to be embracing the sociocultural approach more readily.
Yeah.
It seems like the US is still kind of, grappling with how to move beyond that traditional sports-centric model.
So there's room for growth.
Yeah, for sure.
There in the US.
For sure.
I'm also starting to think about how these ideas could apply beyond just physical education.
Okay, yeah.
Could this sociocultural approach be relevant
to
other subjects and areas of life?
That's one of the most exciting parts of Lynch's work.
Okay, good.
He's challenging us to think about how we can make all learning experiences more holistic, engaging, and relevant to students' lives.
This is giving me so much to think about.
Good. I'm glad.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory, the challenges, the global context. Now I'm ready to get to like the nitty-gritty. How does the sociocultural approach actually play out in the classroom?
Let's do it.
What are some concrete examples of teachers putting these ideas into action? So let's get into some examples.
Okay, yeah.
Do you have any from Lynch's book?
Yeah, he has some really good ones.
Okay, cool.
That really illustrate how this is being used, like in real PE classes.
I'm all about those practical takeaways.
Okay, so picture this.
Okay.
Instead of just playing like a game of soccer, the students are actually tasked with designing their own game.
Oh, wow.
Based on like principles of teamwork and strategy and fair play.
That's really so it's not just about winning, it's about the process.
Exactly. And they're developing all these like problem-solving skills.
Yeah.
Communication, critical thinking.
It's like PE meets STEM.
Right.
I love it.
It's a much more active and engaging learning experience.
Yeah. And it's not just about following the rules. It's about like understanding why the rules exist.
Exactly.
And how you can adapt them.
Yeah.
And apply them in different situations.
And that's really, the heart of the sociocultural approach. Like it empowers students to really take ownership of their learning.
Yeah.
And make those connections to their lives.
Were there any other like creative approaches that stood out to you in his book?
He talked about using physical activity as like a lens.
Okay.
For exploring different cultures and historical periods.
Oh, cool.
So, for example, instead of just reading about ancient Greece in a textbook, students could actually try, like javelin throwing or wrestling or even chariot racing.
Okay, with some adaptations, obviously.
Of course.
This sounds so fun.
Yeah. And it helps them, like, develop a deeper understanding of that culture.
You're not just memorizing facts. Right. They're like embodying it.
Exactly, and making it relevant to their own lives.
It makes me think we could apply this to other subjects, even like as adults.
Definitely. That idea of connecting learning to personal experience and cultural context.
It's so important.
It is, and it's something we can all benefit from no matter what we're doing.
This has been so inspiring.
Oh, good.
It's a reminder that learning should be joyful and engaging and relevant to our lives.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive into Timothy Lynch's work.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
If you could redesign PE from scratch, using the sociocultural lens, what would it look like? What would you include? How would you connect those activities to students' lives outside of school? Let us know. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.